Good morning, welcome back. Okay, now after 3 consecutive videos on the bike build, I thought today I would bring you something a little bit different. So after a positive response to a little trick I used in a recent video, I thought I might bring you a few more tips and tricks and pass on some little gems that you might find useful. So here's a 10-tip countdown, starting with the little trick that inspired this video. Right, if you need to hold a bolt in the vise, easy enough. Bolt it in by its head. But if for some reason you need to hold it further down, then obviously you can't hold the thread in the vise because you'll crush those delicate threads, damage them, and then you won't be able to use the bolt. So you could put a nut on the thread, easy enough. Then you can put it in the vise by the nut and the head. But that's not going to hold it very tight because a nut is free to spin unless you split it. So take the nut, put it in the vise, with it poking out about half its thickness. And take a hacksaw and split the nut right the way through to the inside. Then once it's cut through, spin it onto the thread, and then because it's cut open, effectively there's a gap in it, meaning that is a gap you can crush. So pop it in the vise, and then you can hold it as tight as you like, because the nut with its little tiny gap will crush round the thread and actually protect it from any damage from the vise. And it also has another use as well. If you need to cut that bolt down, you can use the split nut as a guide. I'll show you. Pop it in the vise with the head one end and the split nut at the other end, just poking out of the side of the vise. Nip it up nice and tight, and the split nut will not only hold that absolutely still, also it will provide you with a guide to cut that absolutely square first time. Then the next bonus is push the thread through very slightly, tighten it back in the vise so that the end that you've just cut is just sticking out. That way you can use a file and take the burr off from the hacksaw. And finally, holding the head of the bolt, use the split nut, winding it off the bolt to clean up the thread. So it's absolutely perfect. Now that is ready to go straight into a thread, nice and clean, first time, and it's dead square. Okay, if you're going to cut a piece of metal and it's going to stick out the side of the vise when you cut it, which it would, and you're going to use a hacksaw, then make sure that wherever hand you favour to hold your hacksaw handle in, put the metal out that side of the vise. If you're right-handed, stick it out the right-hand side of the vise. If, like me, you're left-handed, stick it out the left-hand side of the vise. That way, when you cut the piece of metal like that, you get to that last stroke as it cuts through, you go forward, you don't fist punch the vise. If you're doing it the wrong way around, right hand on the left-hand side of the vise, you're going to cut through. As you come forward, you're going to fist punch your vise, which is really uncomfortable. Or worse still, the piece of metal that's sticking out that you've just cut off, you might catch that with the back of your fist as well, which is even more uncomfortable. So if you're cutting and the metal's hanging out the sides of the vise, you're left-handed, stick it out the left. If you're right-handed, stick it out the right. It's really straightforward. Okay, sticking with the vise and cutting pieces of metal, after you've hacksawed it, it's going to be rough. So you're going to want to file it nice and smooth. So we all know the obvious one. A file only works in one direction. None of this business, it doesn't do anything except wreck your file. So cutting in one direction is obvious, but something else that's not quite so obvious, with your file, make sure you have a handle on it. It really is simple and really straightforward, and yet still in YouTube videos, I see people using the file naked with no handle. Now, files come like this, with a sharp metal tang on the inside, and very often the handle on your file is not bonded on. If you've got a wooden handle on your file, they just fall off. You'll know that all the time. So either bond it or glue it on or something to make sure it sticks and it doesn't come off, and never use a file without the handle on it. It's so easy when you're in a rush, you're doing a little piece of fabricating work, you've hacksawed something off, reach for the file, You just want to take a burr off. The handle's missing for a second, so you pick a file up like that, you put it in your hand, and you just do the filing bit you have to do. But the danger is there. That tang, it's extremely easy for that to go straight into your hand. And yes, all of these things are born of my personal, bitter and painful experience over 30 years of doing this. That might not look sharp on the end there, but when you're filing, I'll use the one with the handle. When you're filing, there's an element of force in your hand pushing it forward. So if you're using it like that, then you can expect to try and embed that into the flesh in your hand, which smarts a little bit. Okay, this one I want to credit with another YouTube creator. There's a very clever and educating machinist out there called Joe Pieczynski. I follow every video he posts up. Joe Pi runs a company called Advanced Innovations, and he has a website, so I'm going to put a link under this video to his channel, so you can go along there, give him some love and learn some stuff from him like I do. Now, the first thing I've learned to do when showing this particular trick, as he did, is unplug the lathe. I'm not even going to plug the machine in. This machine is dead. There's no power to it because this is pretty nasty. What it involves is when people take a piece of emery cloth and they want to polish a piece of spinning metal in the lathe. So they wrap the cloth around it. Can you already see it? It's already coming, isn't it? And they hold the piece of emery cloth like that and allow the metal to spin inside. I've seen many machinists do it on many channels. And as Joe said, if you're holding it with a finger and thumb here to get a little bit more pressure on that and polish a nice finish in it, the danger is that this piece of paper, the drag on this emery cloth or emery paper, can roll round, actually fold in on itself and form a reel and start reeling you in an instant. And then boom, your thumb is caught underneath. And that's going to make a horrible mess because it's going to happen so fast, you're not even going to know it's happened until it's happened. So as Joe said, if you're going to put a piece of emery cloth round and hold it, it's got to be right out here as far away as the machine as possible, or preferably, as I do, I hold it underneath only and I allow it like a little saw backwards and forwards, which gives me fresh emery paper that I'm always against the metal rather than wrapping it round. So there we are. Thank you to Joe Pi. I appreciate that, sir. That is a fantastic tip. We should all know if you're going to use a home hobby lathe and you're not a professional metal spinner, these kind of tips are priceless and they'll save you potential injuries, which could be pretty horrible. Right, for this one, bench grinder. Hands up who's got a bench grinder. Yep, probably all of you. A fantastic piece of equipment for a fantastic array of different jobs. You can put a wire wheel one side and a grindstone the other, and you can do any number of different things with it. Now, I don't want to talk about any of the safety things you might do with a grinder or any of the accidents you might have, save one, and that is stones breaking up. When you buy a stone, when you buy a bench grinder, this is still a test you can carry out for yourself that could potentially save your life. And that is to test the stone, the grinding stone, to see if it's in one piece. And it's something that my buddy Mr. Dyson calls the ring test. It is the proper name for it. All you need to do, take the stone out of the machine. They normally bolt it onto a shaft. That's a brand new one. And pop a screwdriver through the hole so you're not holding onto it because you're looking for it to ring, to vibrate. Take a handle of a screwdriver and just tap it. Not too hard, all round. You're looking for it to ring like a bell. That's lovely. That stone is in one piece. And what it means is if there's a crack in that stone, a fracture or any damage whatsoever, it won't ring like that. It'll be more of a thud. And if it does that, chuck it in the bin and throw it away. But that piece of stone, if it breaks free, it becomes ballistic because these things are spinning at a seriously high rate of knots. So if you buy a bench grinder stone or you buy a bench grinder, even if you buy it from a manufacturer, it doesn't matter. It could have been dropped. Whatever it is, check for yourself. Easy, isn't it? Okay, this video wouldn't be complete without talking about something to do with the 4.5-inch grinder. A fantastic tool, we've all got one, but I'm losing count of the amount of big, large volume YouTube creators, people with millions of subscribers using these things in their videos with no safety guard on. Even recently I saw a bona fide television show on BBC Two and they were using a grinder on a motorcycle project with no guard on it whatsoever. It just makes me wince, it truly does, because that is a hand guard. It's there to prevent the interface between your index finger and the back of the disc. If you hold it in your left hand, if you hold it in your right hand, then the end of your thumb. Whatever it is, you're going to grip that grinder. You have to. Even if you have the extra handle on it on the side and you hold that there, you're still going to hold it with this hand. And that's what that guard is for. It rotates and moves around the disc so you can put it in the place you need it to be to protect you from the disc. Okay, so if you're using a 4.5-inch grinder, no matter what you see or who you see using one, for you, put the guard on it. Get used to using it with the guard, because believe me, that thing will slice through your bone before you even know it's done it. They're absolutely vicious. Put the guard on your grinder. Right, now this one is about grinding and welding. When you're grinding, you make showers of sparks. When you're welding, you make showers of sparks. And obviously here I've got a nest of rattle cans, and there's all manner of things here: penetrating oil, cutting oils, WD-40, chain wax, chain lubricants, all sorts of things that are potentially flammable. And they're inside a tin can that's made of the thinnest possible metal. And just take a look, if you will, here at my steel engineering rule. Now this had a blob of weld land on it right here, and you see it burned its way right through to the other side. And that is a millimetre thick stainless steel. One of these is not a millimetre thick stainless steel. It's probably half that thickness, and it's probably aluminium. So that would have burned through one of these with potentially disastrous results. So wherever your grinding and welding area is, keep it well away from a nest of rattle cans or even one rattle can, even a paint can on the side. And naturally, it goes without saying, if you're grinding and welding, fire extinguishers. In my garage, I've got all three. I've got water, powder, and I've got a foam one the other side. So if ever I have an issue, I can reach for a fire extinguisher and put the fire out, chief. It's as simple as that. It doesn't really need explaining. They don't cost a lot of money. And if you've got one, make sure that it's in the green on its little gauge. And if you're not sure, take it to a company that can recharge it and give you a new certificate for it, because they're no use to you if they don't work. Right, this one's a little off topic, but just as relevant, your disc lock. Now, hands up how many times you've gone out on a freezing cold morning and your disc lock is frozen, or the padlock on your shed, and you can't get your bike out and you're late for work. Well, we normally find some way of defrosting it, getting it open, chucking it to one side and going to work because we're late. There's a little bit more to do if you really don't want the grief again. All you do, take the lock, once it's undone, then lock it undone, so that those parts inside aren't all touching. That's actually free to go. Now, then put it on a radiator or in front of a blow heater or something for at least an hour. What you're looking to do is dry it out. Evaporate all the moisture that's inside there by using the warmth of the metal. So you don't want too much heat on it, so you don't want to distort anything or cause any problems. Just enough warmth for long enough to make sure that the metal inside there permeates right through to the center of that lock, and it warms everything up and evaporates all the moisture away. So what's inside there then is completely bone dry. Once the lock is dry, then just got to lubricate it. Now, don't use WD-40 because it's too runny and the rain eventually will wash it out. Instead, use something a little bit more sensible. Use white lithium grease. If you've got some, you can get it from WD-40. They do a white lithium in their specialist range. Just shake it up and give it a little squirt inside, and don't necessarily fill the lock right up and make it all gungy and horrible. Just needs a little squirt in there, and that will coat all of the internal components, all those little tumblers in there, with lithium grease. And that means that the water, even if water gets in there, even if there's other gaps that eventually will refill with water, the grease on the surface will mean the ice can't stick, so it won't freeze shut again. And if you're not posh and you don't have white lithium grease, then what about chain wax? You can't beat it. Chain wax is almost the same stuff. All right, before I get flamed, it's not, but chain wax works very much the same. It's a lubricant with a sticky substance that attaches it and leaves it in there. So if you haven't got any posh white lithium grease, use chain wax, just a little bit inside the lock, and do it every now and again, and then dry it out every now and again, and re-lube it every now and again, and you'll never be late for work like I have, because your bike was frozen solid and you could get the lock off. Okay, you might think this one's a little bit square, and it's a risk assessment. Do a risk assessment on the job you're about to embark on. And I do it all the time. I think we all do. If you think about coming up to a junction on your motorcycle, you're going to pull out, you look right, you look left, you make sure it's clear. Well, that's a risk assessment. You're assessing the risk to see if it's safe. And do that with a job. Whatever it is you're going to do on your bike, look at whether you can support the bike safely on a lift. Have you got your ratchet straps? Are they working or are they frayed? Is the lift working properly? If you've got enough room to do the job, you're not going to trip over things and hurt yourself. And have you got all the tools you need? You're risk assessing all the time. So it doesn't hurt to think every job through, even if necessary, make a few notes, write a few things down, and you'll find, I need that. Go off and get it so you don't have to stop halfway and fail to finish the job. So there we are, a little risk assessment. It's very simple. And one of the most important things, if you're going to do something on your own, as I do mostly in my garage working by myself, make sure your phone is in your back pocket where you can reach it, or at least within arm's reach. That way, if you find yourself injured, hurt, incapacitated, or pinned underneath your bike up against the wall, whatever it is, you can call for help. I always have my phone nearby, just a little bit of a safety net when you're working on your own. So there we are. So what's number one? Finally, number one in this video. All right, now in all these countdown type videos, number one is always the biggest one. It's the top slot. It's the one that everyone's waiting to see because it's the most important or the biggest or the most successful. That's why I want to leave number one, if I can, over to you. So I've done 10 down to 2. These are my basic tips and tricks. I could do a dozen more. I'm sure we all could. So why don't you put something you think is the most important thing that you would want to pass on to your fellow riders and put it underneath in the comments. Keep it clean, keep it respectful, and keep it useful. And let's see if we can all benefit from each other like a big old YouTube family. So there we are. Thank you to all of you for watching. Thank you to Joe Pye for his contribution. And take it easy, ride safe, and we'll see you next time.